these are basically mostly for, change requests or, fixing issues and introducing, a few other aspects. But if you look at where most of the defects are being detected, it's being detected in system and user acceptance testing. They put it together. Basically, you have more than 60% is being found there. So the point is, if you look at these two graphs together, one that we're coming off from this analysis is that we're reducing the defects very early, very advanced. We're finding them very late, where it's very expensive to correct. So if you do just the math of multiply the number of defects that you find with a number here, you can see that from an economical point of view, you find it very late where it's very costly. I'll leave this as a cliffhanger for just to think about it for a while, because I'll get back to when we discuss Agile. Let's discuss, iterations and increments. Basically, like we saw in this painting by Beckar, there are two concepts. One is called increments and iterations. The idea behind increments is that you have one small piece, you keep adding different pieces on top of that. So each time you do a new piece, you have A, B, and B, and then you see that you have A, B, and C, but you keep A and B untouched. Iterations, on the other hand, is we have A, B, and C, but you keep evolving those, adapting those, and changing those. So you have the first iteration, A, B, and C in a certain flavor. Then A, B, and C, and which more or less, where you have C more or less in the final stage, and then you have A, B, and C at the end, at the very final stage. So these are the two differences between iterations and increments. In reality, we're talking about these two things together. In a sense, some people both apply increments and iterations in the same iterations. So the idea behind, if you take a step back, as mentioned, there were some limitations in the lead model and sequential models, and there's the whole cost element where we were finding defects where they're expensive to correct, have led to the idea of let's try and see if we can do some elements that will allow us to find defects early on. So basically the idea was to take the same phases and break them down to chunks and create a V model, basically like mini V models, and include one V model against the second one, and the third one, and so forth. And in this way, we have like a train of different increments. So what is Agile? So Agile is basically the ability to be nimble, the ability to adapt to change. In 2001, where a group of people were gathered in this ski huts in the mountains, and instead of skiing, they were sitting and discussing software development models. And this is basically where the concept of the Agile manifesto came up. It was a system of four core elements. One is that software is about individual interaction with all processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. What did he mean by that? He said that they value the items on the right hand, processing tools, documentation, contract negotiations, following a plan. However, they see more values in the items to the left. So they're trying to push as much as possible to the left. This is the idea behind the Agile manifesto. This is from there, a number of methodologies were born. We have extreme programming, Crystal, ESPM, Scrum. I would say Scrum is a project management approach, but was also born behind this with the same concept in mind. And the idea is again focused on these core elements: individuals, customer involvement, working software, and responsibility for change. So, from a testing point of view, the biggest change is going away from prescriptive requirements requirements that will be adapted or basically changing along the way. What do I mean by that? Some of the fun things we were discussing before we had in our session, we discussed it for testing. When given, let me give you an example of that. I would say to you, I want to test this feature, this import feature that we have in the application. Now, if I come and tell you, well, I've created, this is the detailed step by step showing what we need to do, and this is the expected outcome. Please, run that test. This would be one approach. Now, if on the other hand, come with a blank sheet and say, just test this input functionality. It's up to you to decide how you're going to do it. But basically, I want you to cover, maybe these 3 points. But how you do that, that's up to you. What do you think would be more fun? First one or second one? Second one, why? Because the first one is basically respecting your creativity, isn't it? Basically, you're saying this is your script, and you can only do this. So this one thing. Another thing is, it's not allowing you to explore outside the context of what's here. The other one is saying, okay, test this, but how you get there is up to you. So it's allowing the freedom of exploring different areas. Because sometimes as testers, you're sitting doing some testing and say, I'm supposed to test this, input functionality. But hey, this is looking very strange. I want to give a look at this other feature here in front. Oh, this is also going. Oh, I might be much more important. So there's an element actually of creating fun that is equally important when we talk about Agile. I'll get back to this also. Again, I'll cliffhangers. So one of the first Agile methodologies that came were positive programming. You probably heard about that. Came back and it was 20 years back. You see actually the core values of programming. But let me pick up on a few things. One of the things that he came up with was at the time was mind-blowing. He was saying, during coding, I want to do pair programming. I want 2 developers to sit together, maybe not in the same chair, but I want them to sit and do the coding. Why? What's the value of it for this? Anyone? What cost? As we discussed before, if you remember, the cost of finding defects is very high at the very late stages, and we're finding very late. So his idea was, let's put those, try to get as close to the source as possible. We're not unit coding, so we're not at the requirement stage, but secondly, we're doing the coding, obviously. I'll be doing some coding, you'll be reading what I'm doing, and vice versa. You can then avoid some of these. You'll be asking, hey, why are you doing it this way? So this our whole idea is trying to get as close as possible to the core, where the defects are happening. Other aspects will be user stories. Instead of, as we discussed before, adding user acceptance testing at the end. And then, I think the question was, when we asked what is the objective here, basically asking the user, is it the right thing that we developed? Sometimes, the problem is sometimes these, iterations can be very long, sometimes it can be very, maybe it's a year or 2 sometimes. So imagine after a few years of development work and testing and coding and everything, you come to the customer and say, oh, actually this is not what I wanted. The idea behind involving small, frequent release involving the customer at the end is having close customer interaction involvement. You don't want to wait more than 2 to 4 weeks to find out whether you have met the expectation of the customer. Okay? So what time do we have? We extend it. Okay. Let me speed up a bit. We see a number of Agile methods coming up, and DevOps is the new one. By the way, anyone familiar with DevOps here? One DevOps? DevOps is the new cool kid on the block with respect to Agile. DevOps is about combining actually infrastructure with, this is a shift right, we'll say, from a testing point of view. So the idea is here, in the past, when you were going to develop frequently, so you have, if you have a release every second or fourth week, you need to put it into production. Then production folks will not be very happy. They actually, for them, it's a hassle because basically each time they need to do a lot of things to put it in production. You got the environment ready, you need to do all installation, configuration, you do all the testing on the environment side. And this created an issue that you have a mismatch between the development methodology, where we have a lot of frequent releases, and actually the operations that are trying to push back and trying to limit the number of releases that. So the idea behind DevOps is actually operations coming together with development and testing. So here we're pushing and some of the testing activities to develop itself, but making sure that they can be adaptive and they can follow up with the development as a developer. So here actually, operation folks put part of the Agile team. This is the new kid on the block. This is the DevOps team. And it also about continuous integration delivery, in the sense that you have a working increment of the software that you put in production. And this can be done on a regular basis, maybe once in a second week, as I mentioned, but it can also be as frequent as daily, as hourly, keeping like steady flow of release going into production over time. Okay. So let's look at some of the issues when you want to introduce Agile into your organization. Let's take one, which is automation. First of all, if you want to release very rapidly, as well, you want to have very short increments. And you're allowing change to happen, releasing every increment, as mentioned. When you value responsive to change and basically ability to cope with the change high. What are the challenges from a testing point of view? Sorry? Timeline? Why?
Because you do the timeline computer.
You're right. Problem is, of course, from a testing point of view. Let's say you have this as a part of your software. You're making some changes, and you're adding this also. So, from a testing point of view, and then in third iteration, you have 3 of those. From a testing point of view, obviously, even if it's only a new one that you need to focus your testing on, you still need to do the regression testing and make sure that what used to work yesterday still works today. So, from a testing point of view, the effort is increasing when you go into Agile, because you have multiple releases, and you still want to make sure that what used to work will still work. So what becomes evident is that automation is a prerequisite for having a successful Agile, because if you don't do that, then obviously the manual testing will become a bottleneck in the process. You'll not be able to do all the testing in the context of one iteration. So automation will be one of the challenges. And the idea is, of course, we have a pyramid focusing on having most of the automation at the unit test level. Why? Because unit test, as we were discussing before, is the basic elements. If these are where you at least know that the foundation is there, the basic functionality works fully. System integration testing is, of course, the second layer, where basically you still want to make sure that the integrations and interfaces that work, the data is being passed on from one interface to the other, that still you have overall functioning system. But maybe you need less automation at that level that compared to unit system. Thing is, once you get to the higher levels, is where automation also becomes, from a maintenance point of view, very heavy. Because if you have some changes, for example, to the graphical user interface, and you're using tools that are communicating or automating to the graphical user interface, then suddenly the automation will start working because they have introduced something regular. You know, they have introduced new steps in the process, or they have introduced new things that they're doing. So vulnerability will be higher than at unit system. And at the UAT level, obviously, you might not need that many automated testing. You might just need some end-to-end test scenarios that will cover some of the regression and some of the high-level testing. So this is the kind of pyramid that we want to achieve in automation. However, at the same time, it's going to create a challenge in many organizations that you might not have the competencies, the skill set in your team to be a part